It's Denise, live every Tuesday here on The Drive at HN Network. The weather is a little crazy today, isn't it? Yesterday we drove home from Massachusetts in pretty much an ice storm, and today it's almost flip-flop weather. Anyways, The Drive, for those of you that are new tuning in, are all things motivational. People, places, ideas that move us forward. It's how you fuel your life. Your mind, your body, spirit creates the lifestyle you live. We're going to talk about a very important topic today that probably many of you aren't aware of unless you've experienced it, and that's childhood cancers. And we're going to talk about dealing with childhood cancer in families and supporting them within that journey and after. Today I have a very special guest, family advocate, Fairfield Board of Ed member, and Fairfield resident, Jessica Gerber. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks for
Nice
having
to see
me.
you. Thanks for coming in. So we know that there's an event coming up, and that was sort of what pinged my attention. I was talking to one of our mutual friends, Debbie O'Keefe, about the Baldrick's event that happens every March. And she said that you might be willing to come on The Drive, and I reached out, and you graciously said yes. So thank you so very much.
Oh, well, I'm really happy to have the opportunity.
We're really glad that you can be here and hopefully share your story and enlighten us and how we can all move forward in helping better understand, because I think people have a lot of questions, but they don't know what to ask, and they don't know how to ask it.
Right.
So tell us how long you've been in Fairfield, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us about your journey.
Okay. Well, I've lived in Fairfield since 1996. And just to backtrack a little bit, I was born in Baltimore. My parents worked together at the Baltimore Sun. And after about a year of living there, we moved up to Newark, New Jersey, because my dad got a job at the New York Times. We stayed there for a couple of years, and things got a little dicey in terms of safety. We had a bullet shot in our window in our apartment, so we decided to move to the suburbs. My parents really wanted to move to a town that had a good, strong school district, so we moved to Rockland County, which is about an hour from here across the Tappan Zee Bridge, to a town called Suffern. And my sister and I went through the public school system, I graduated from high school in 1986. I went to Wesleyan University up the road in Middletown, Connecticut, and graduated from there in 1990, and then worked for book publishing for about 4 years, setting up author interviews and things like this. And then,
Oh, so you're no stranger to this.
I am no stranger whatsoever, yeah. I mean, I usually was sitting on the side while an author I worked with was sitting on this chair here, but I certainly know the whole process. And so in 1994, I married my husband, Bill. We met when I was in college at Wesleyan, and we moved to Hong Kong for a year. And then he was transferred to London. We lived there for about 6 months. And then we knew we wanted to come back to the US. He got a job in Hartford. I knew I wanted to work back in book publishing in New York. So we looked at a map and said, Fairfield's pretty much halfway in between Hartford and New York. So let's move there. So we rented a house for a little while, loved the town, loved the community.
Town's great.
It's wonderful. And so that was in 1996. After about 6 months, we said, we want to put down roots here. So we looked around, found a house, bought it. And about a year after we bought our house, we had our first child, John. A couple of weeks after I had him, Bill was leaving for work in the morning and said, remember I told you there was a chance we might be moving to Asia again? It's going to happen. We'll talk about it tonight, and ran out the door.
Oh, joy.
Yeah, so like, what? And so his job transferred him to Taipei, Taiwan. And not a great place to move with a newborn, especially your first. But we kind of gutted it out. We kept our house in Fairfield, which was great, so we could come home for extended holidays, and in the summer, lots of long plane rides. But in the end, it was a really great experience in a lot of ways, but we were very happy when we came home for good. He got a new job back in Connecticut, so we moved back into our house. I was pregnant with my second child, Teddy, at the time. He was born in February 2001, and about 20 months after that, I had our third child, Jillian, who was born in October of 2002. So with 3 children under the age of 5 and a husband who worked long hours and traveled a great deal.
You were very relaxed. Let me fill in the blank.
Yes. But I also realized that, I'd kind of always thought, well, maybe I'd get back into book publishing or some other job. And I just thought at this stage in the game, I need to do something to, for myself, but I don't think a full-time job is really going to cut it. So I started looking for ways to volunteer in the community, and there were plenty of those. I joined the Junior League for a while. I volunteered at my children's preschools, and then when John, my older son, started elementary school, I started volunteering with the PTA there at Osborne Hill School, and became really involved in a lot of different committees. I became the Board of Education rep for the PTA, at first because it was a job nobody else wanted to do, because everyone's like, oh, Board of Ed meetings are so boring, we don't want to be a part of it.
And long.
and long. I, strangely enough, found them very interesting. So I said, well, I'll do it. And so they said, sign her up. And I kept signing up year after year, doing the Board of Ed rep job. And I thought about running, but I thought, I'll wait till my children get older, and then I'll maybe, put my hat in the ring then. Our family was thrown a curveball, though, at the beginning of 3rd grade for my younger son, Teddy. He started feeling off. Normally he was just full of energy, full of enthusiasm, and he just seemed blah. He was getting these fevers that would last for a few days and go away. We'd take him to the doctor. They'd say, no, there's nothing here. There's no ear infection, no sinus infection. It's just a fever virus. So we'd go home, a week or so later, something else. And just he was getting progressively more blah. His appetite was waning. And, they did blood work, nothing. It was one of those things we just couldn't put our finger on it. Nobody else was getting sick.
What was the span of time? Was this like a month, 2 months?
It was about a month and a half. I mean, it started Labor Day weekend, actually. So it was right, school starts right before Labor Day. He went to school, was fine. And then that weekend, he came down with this fever. And then it just throughout September and throughout October. So it was 2 months. This kind of up and down thing. And for a while we thought, well, maybe he's being bullied. Maybe there's something going on. And we'd ask him, and we said, no, there's nothing wrong. But he just seemed down. And it got to the point where I actually called his teacher and said, can we set up a meeting? And she asked why, and I explained. And she said, I did notice he was actually a little down for him. So even she had noticed. So we set up a meeting, and before we had a chance to have that meeting, I got a call from the school nurse saying that Teddy had thrown up at school. And this was right when the flu was going around, and so we thought, well, maybe it's the flu. Maybe that's what it is. So we went to the doctor's office, and his regular pediatrician wasn't there, but another doctor saw him and said, he just doesn't look right. His color's off. His liver feels a little enlarged. We'd like you to go get some scans done. So we said, okay, we'll get some scans done. So we went to one of the places in Fairfield that does scans, and they did some scans, and they said, we'd like to do an ultrasound. But we don't do ultrasounds here, so you're going to have to go to another place in Stratford. So we said, okay. So we get in the car, drive up to Stratford.
That's getting maddening.
It is, and there was just this really kind of intangible feeling. There's something there I'm trying to grasp, and it's just out of my reach, and I don't know what the answer is. So we were waiting in Stratford for the ultrasound, and his regular pediatrician, who had come in later, called me and said, I really don't like the sound of this. I'd like you to get copies of all the tests done that you've had done, bring them with you, go to Yale New Haven Hospital. I'm going to call ahead to the ER. I'm going to tell them you're coming so they can get you through quickly. I just want somebody to check this out. I'm just concerned. So I said, fine. So we had the ultrasound done. They gave us all of the stuff, and then they sent us on our way. So we drove up to Yale and went into the ER, and they had gotten, were contacted by the pediatrician. And so I gave them the whole spiel, and they found him a room in the ER, and they did an echocardiogram, and they said, well, he has some fluid in the lining of his heart, the pericardium, which, surrounds the heart. And they said it's making, his heart is working really hard, and he's having, and he was in more distress as the day went on. He was having, trouble he was really out of breath.
Wow.
And they said, and there's also some fluid outside of his lungs. So normally you think fluid in your lungs is, pneumonia or something like that, but this was outside, but it was pressing the lungs. And they said, we're going to need to drain that ASAP. So they admitted him into the ICU, and they drained the fluid. They could do it actually in the room, so he didn't have to go into surgery. They just sedated him. And so Bill, my husband, and I just it was ICU, and half was pediatric oncology. And I remember seeing children, bald children with their IVs, and just thinking, at least it's not that. At least it's not that. They're going to drain the fluid, and then we'll go home or something like that. You're new, and you're not really sure where you're going with it.
Right.
So we finally, got contacted by the doctor, and they said, we can talk to you now. So they said, we drained a ton of fluid. There's still more coming out by the lungs. The heart they took care of. The lungs, there was still a lot. So we're just going to keep him with the chest tube, just draining the fluid out. He's going to have to be here for a few days.
What? A few days?
Right.
Wow.
And meanwhile, I'm thinking, it was my daughter Jillian's birthday party that weekend. And I was like, but what? I've got to do a birthday party, and he's got a soccer game tomorrow. You're still kind of in that routine of your normal life. And so for the next few days, we were kind of in this limbo. That was a Friday, so the weekend.
So you still don't really know what's going on?
Still don't really know what's going on. So we waited a couple of days. On the Sunday, they did a CAT scan, and still fluids draining out. And And so I spent that night, the Sunday night, in the hospital, and Bill was home with our other children. And the next morning, the attending in the ICU said, "I need to talk to you." And he took me into this awful room with no windows and sat me down and said, "The CAT scan results came back. Your son has a growth the size of a man's fist growing out of his heart." And he said, "We don't know what it is. We're going to have to do a biopsy, but we just want to let you know." And I just thought, how can this be? You're just, it's just the rug has been pulled out from under you and you're not really sure what to do or say, but you just kind of have to keep going. So I remember calling Bill and telling him, and he called other people. And I remember thinking—
Did you tell your child at this point?
No, we did not tell him right away because he was in a lot of distress still, and we just didn't, we didn't even know really.
Did they
what
call
to
it
say.
cancer? Did they just tell it
Well,
the
they
growth?
didn't, because they wanted to do a biopsy first. They weren't sure if it was benign or malignant, so they said it's a growth.
Right.
We don't know what it is, that's why we have to do the biopsy.
Right.
So I called Bill, and I remember thinking I was really glad that the month before had been my birthday, and my kids and Bill had given me an iPhone. So I could text and email people, because I just thought I don't want to have to call people.
Or talk, yeah.
I don't want to talk about it, but at the same time I wanted to let people know so that, our neighbors would know, and we still had to worry about the other two kids who were getting home from school, and they were young enough and we didn't want to leave them alone. So it was a great communication tool, and I remember thinking, thank heavens I got this for my birthday last month. It's just weird.
What year was this happening?
This was in November of 2009. So in any event, then for the next 24 hours, we just kind of had discussions about what the biopsy was going to be. They were going to have to do surgery. They also wanted to put in a better chest tube to drain this fluid that was still coming out of him, because the one they had was small, and they wanted to get a bigger one to really get it out of there. So. And we met with the surgeon, and they tell you all of these awful things that could possibly go wrong with the surgery, and your mind's kind of going there. And I know they have to do that, but
the small print will kill you.
Right, exactly. And so then he went in for the biopsy and for the other putting in the tube and whatnot. And the pediatric oncologist came in an hour or so later into the waiting room and said, "I'm sorry, it's malignant." And and.
Were you there alone?
No, it was Bill and I were both there.
Okay.
And my parents had come over to stay with the children, and we had, neighbors coming out of the woodwork, there to try to help. So we could focus on being at the hospital, the two of us, to be with Teddy. And so I think actually that was when we finally ended up telling him that he did have this tumor, because we didn't want to say something until we had a better sense of what it was. Unfortunately, even though they knew that it was malignant, and they knew it was a sarcoma, which is a soft tissue tumor, they still didn't know exactly what type it was. They said it doesn't fit the parameters, and we just thought, of course it doesn't. We can't, it can't just be something that they would be able to say, we know it's this is what we have to do. And they said, so we're going to have to do more testing to figure out what it is. So
and you're still in Yale at this point.
We're still at Yale. And so we, are lucky in that we have a lot of friends who are doctors or friends with doctors. So immediately we're on our phones reaching out to everyone saying, do you know people, we're at Yale, should we stay here? Should we go somewhere else? They want to start with chemotherapy because of the location of the tumor and the size of it. They didn't recommend operating right away. They wanted to reduce the tumor through the chemo first. And so we talked to a lot of friends who are doctors, and they said, if you're just starting with the chemotherapy, fortunately / unfortunately, because there aren't that many different chemo medications, it really doesn't matter where you are, that you'll get the same chemo anywhere. And if you're there, and if he's already settled in the hospital, it will probably be a lot easier. Plus you're close to home. We're only half an hour from the other kids. So we decided to stay at Yale. And they finally came.
Now, are you making these decisions like this?
Fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a fairly quick turnaround. I mean, he had the biopsy done on the Tuesday late in the day, and then we had Wednesday and Thursday to kind of figure all of these things out in terms of where we're going to keep him there, and also what the chemo protocol was going to be, because they were still trying to figure out what type of sarcoma this was.
Wow.
And they finally came up with the determination that it was undifferentiated sarcoma, which means it didn't really fall into any category.
It went into the miscellaneous.
It went into the miscellaneous pile. So, and of course, every single type of undifferentiated sarcoma is different from the next. So it's not even if, the doctors had seen one type of undifferentiated, it wouldn't necessarily be anything like the kind that Teddy had. But nonetheless, they said there are two different types of chemotherapy that work with sarcomas. So we are going to give him these, and we want to start tomorrow. This was on Thursday that they told us all of this.
Did you tell him yet?
We did tell him, we said that, you have one of the reasons why you're feeling so bad and one of the reasons you have the fluid and everything like that is related to you have a tumor in your chest, and they're going to give you medicine to make it shrink, and then you might have to have an operation if that doesn't make it shrink and go away, and then we'll take it from there. And he did say, am I going to die? And we just said, no, you're not. We are going to work through this. All of these doctors help so many kids, and, we have to stay positive. This is going to be really hard and scary for you, but we've got lots and lots of people who are fighting for you, and so we're just going to go through with it. So just try to stay as positive as possible, obviously. And I think at that point he was feeling so horrible that I think there was maybe a slight bit of relief that at least now he knew what it was, that it wasn't just him, that there was something in him that was making him sick. And, and the doctors and the nurses there were just wonderful. I mean, obviously this is what they do for a living. So they are great with the parents. They're great with the children. We were really lucky in that a really good friend of my husband's who had also gone to Wesleyan was one of the doctors in the ICU. So he wasn't in oncology, but he knew a lot of them, and he would come and he would see Teddy. So we really were so lucky in that sense that we had such a great network within the hospital itself. And then, of course, once we were out in Fairfield with all of the friends and family there too. So we did have a lot of support, which you really need to have because it's just such a horrific, experience to go through. So we started chemotherapy the
Did
Friday.
you come home and tell your children?
We did. Well, we knew it was going to get out, that people were going to talk. And at that point, my son John was in middle school, and he had a phone. So we knew that it was going to come up. And we said what we had said to Teddy, that he has a tumor. It is malignant. It is cancer. But we're going to work really hard to do this. And
do you know where it came from? Like, is it genetic? Is it environmental?
No.
Happenstance.
It was such a rare type that, I don't think we would ever truly be able to pinpoint it.
Was it fast growing? Did they say it was in the? Okay.
Yes. Well, just the fact that he got bad so quickly, relatively speaking. At the end of August, we'd been on vacation at Block Island, swimming in the ocean. We went to a Red Sox game when we got home.
I think we have some of those photos, guys. If you want to flash up a picture of Teddy on Black Island, that would be great.
Yeah. But we just he had a really This was in August of 2009.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of November 2009, he was in the hospital with a growth, this big. So, and they did say that it was very fast growing. They did say it was very aggressive. It was one of those things that, we kind of were beating ourselves up for a while saying, when he first got sick in September, why didn't we say you should do a scan? But of course, it never would have
Hindsight's
occurred.
always 20/20,
exactly.
yeah.
And they did say it was so fast growing that we don't really think it would have given you that much of a better opportunity to deal with it because it happened so quickly. So in any event, we started the chemotherapy on the Friday night, and almost immediately developed a horrible, very rare, of course, reaction to the chemotherapy. He became completely delirious, was screaming and yelling. It was like he was possessed. He didn't know who we were. He didn't know who he was. He couldn't speak. He was just grunting and yelling and screaming. And so they stopped with the IV that they had started with the chemo. And they took him down for a scan just to see if there was any brain damage. There wasn't. And the doctor had told us that there was a very, very minute possibility that he would have a bad reaction. And we thought, of course he would, we would be in that small percentage. So they had to stop that one type of chemotherapy, which was called, ifosfamide. And they said we're just going to have to revisit it. But of course, we were torn because on the one hand, we certainly didn't want him to be in this terrible state. But on the other hand, this was the medicine that was supposed to be helping him. It was supposed to be shrinking his tumor, and yet he couldn't take it.
So are you on autopilot at this point and just making decisions? Or?
Yeah. Well, we did, the doctors were great. They met with us and explained the situation. They said, we're going to stop this one type of chemo right now. They did give him the other one. And it was supposed to be over the course of 3 days. So you had 3 doses over 3 days. Inpatient, he was still in the hospital. Yeah. They said, we're going to have to stop this one for now, and we'll revisit it. There is another type of medicine that you can give in advance of the chemo that will counteract those effects.
Wow.
But we can't do that this round, so we're going to have to wait to the next round, which was 3 weeks out. So we just said, okay, great. So we've missed 3 weeks where this chemo could be helping him, but there was nothing we could do about it. So he got through the rest of the other type of the chemo. He did come back to us and was his normal self. And remember, he woke up one morning and just said, who won the Red Sox game? And he was just totally back to being himself. So he, recuperated for a couple of weeks in the hospital, came home. It was the week before Thanksgiving, so that was great that he was home. This was the first time he had been home.
So
and it was really
September.
Since November. Beginning of November was when he went into the hospital.
Okay.
And then it was the end of November when he came out. And it was also really hard because that was, again, when the flu was really prevalent. And our children weren't allowed to go to the hospital to visit him. So they hadn't seen him at all since he had gone that one day. So we were all together for Thanksgiving. And then right after Thanksgiving, he started his next round of chemo. They did give him the pre-medication, which did help. So that was, at least he could get all of the chemo in that we needed. And then they did a scan after the second round of chemo, and the tumor had grown.
Wow.
And they did say they thought there was, the dead cells there were many more dead cells than live ones, but it had expanded. So it really wasn't the answer we wanted to get. So in the meantime, as all of this was going on, we were frantically working with, family to try to talk to other hospitals in the area or in the country really who would have a surgeon who would want to operate because it was such a terrible location. It was attached to his heart, and his state wasn't so good. So there were some surgeons who were very hesitant, even from really good hospitals. It just, it was not a great situation. So we're still trying to find surgeons. He was home for Christmas, went back in for another round of chemo, even though it wasn't really working, there was nothing else we could do. There was no other chemo to give him. These were our only options. So after the new year, we did find a surgeon who was at Columbia Presbyterian, who said that he would operate and that because of the involvement with the heart, he also suggested having a cardiac surgeon on hand, which was great and totally made sense to us. And so we were thrilled that he had, suggested that on his own. So we set up his surgery for the beginning of February. His birthday was February 6th, so he was able to have his birthday party. And then 3 days later, he went into the hospital, and it was about a 10-hour surgery.
Wow.
Which was just, the longest 10 hours of our life up until that point.
That's a huge recuperation under semi-good circumstances.
Exactly. And I think the problem is that they weren't able to get the entire tumor that time around because it turned out not only was it attached to his heart, it had actually grown into his heart.
Because it was soft tissue.
Right, exactly. And so they removed about 97% of the tumor. They had to remove part of his lung. They had to remove some other things, and they said, but we couldn't do the heart because we would have had to do open heart surgery. And starting open heart surgery after 10 hours of additional surgery would have really not been a good thing. So they said, we're going to let him recover from this surgery, and then we will do the open heart surgery to get the rest of the tumor.
Where is everybody in your family, particularly you and Bill and the kids, in this whole process? Like, what's the mindset? And how are you keeping everybody positive, including yourself?
Well, I think part of it is we were trying to keep our other two children's lives as normal as possible, as best as we could. They had to go to school every day. They had sports, they had activities, they had play dates, they had birthday parties they were going to, sleepovers. So as best as we could, we tried to, within the parameters we had, have their lives be normal. I was lucky in that, we had my parents who were able to come help. My sister lives in New York, so she could come out and help on weekends. We had a great network in our neighborhood of people, who had known Teddy since he'd been a baby, who just pitched in. A couple of them set up a schedule where we had meals brought to our house 4 days a week. During the week, which was great, but we still had our Pizza Fridays, which we'd always had before the kids, before Teddy got sick, because you just want to have as much normalcy as you can, to the best extent you can. So that was kind of where we were on that, and it was really hard, and we were never, when Teddy was in the hospital, one of us was always with him at least, which meant that the other one was at home, and we kind of were two ships passing in the night. But you do what you have to do, for your child, but you also have to think of your other children.
Were you reconciling with yourself that this might not end up positive?
At that point, I would say no, because each time we had a goal. At first it was to find out what it was. Then once we knew what it was to get him started on the chemo and hopefully see if there was something good from the scans. Once that news came back that wasn't good, he said, okay, now we've got to find a surgeon. So really, and then when the surgery went as well as it did, because after he had the one surgery, he did have the open heart surgery, which went incredibly well. They were able to remove the entire visible tumor. They had to patch part of his heart with bovine pericardium, so cow. So we said he'd moo, and he got better, and it really went so remarkably well. He recovered so quickly. I mean, he was out of the hospital after the second operation, I want to say within a week, and was home. And so, we were guardedly optimistic. We knew that it was a very aggressive cancer. It was a very rare cancer. We knew that the chemo hadn't worked. So if it came back, we really didn't have any options.
So what month are we in now after the heart surgery?
So February was the heart surgery. So we came home around the end of February. In the meantime, while we were getting that done, we were looking ahead to radiation. And again, there were problems because of the area with the heart. You didn't want to radiate the heart. But we had heard of, actually, a couple of our family members for non-cancer related things had gone to a treatment center at Mass General Hospital up in Boston for proton beam therapy, which is very focused radiation. So it doesn't impact as much of the healthy tissue as regular radiation does. So we had reached out, as luck had it, a friend of my sister's from college worked at Mass General and knew the head of the program and put us in touch with them. So we
a lot of serendipitous events.
I mean, really, there were a lot of things along the way that we just couldn't believe how lucky we were that we had these connections. So we sent all of the medical information about Teddy's case to the doctors, and they accepted him into the proton beam therapy program. They said that he would want to start maybe about a month after his surgery. So we're looking at the end of March now. So he gets home at the end of February. We have the month of March to kind of focus. And that was actually, so then the end of March we started going up to Boston. And it was once a day, 5 days a week. And again, we got very, very lucky. Another friend of my sister's from college, she'd gone to school in Boston. They had a condo in Cambridge, and we stayed there. It was an extra condo that they had bought for their parents, and their parents would come stay when they were in town, but they weren't in town that often. So we ended up having this amazing condo in Cambridge, right near the T. It was really close to Mass General, so we could drive up, leave our car there, take the T into Mass General. And when he wasn't getting chemo, which he did get a couple of times up there as well, we were able to get around and do things in Boston. We went to Red Sox games. My aunt was living in Boston at the time, so we saw her over April break. Everyone else in our family came up, and we had a wonderful week, doing duck tours and things like that.
Duck tours are fun.
The duck tours are great.
Duck tours are fun.
Yeah, so we did all of that. So really, March and April were great in that even though he was still getting these treatments, we really were kind of on the upswing thinking, we were able to get this really, rare type of, proton therapy, and, we were really hopeful that this was going to do it.
Was your health insurance covering this? Because that's
Yes,
my next biggest question.
It was. I mean, there was a lot of red tape, a lot of very lengthy phone calls, lots of, I's dotted and T's crossed, but at the end, yes, they did pay for the proton, which was good because it was not inexpensive.
I can only imagine.
And
wow.
We were also so lucky that it was, relatively close, as much as it was a pain for us to be apart, because Teddy and I would go up during the week and the kids and Bill would be at home. There were people who were flying in from all over the place. There were, at the time, I think maybe only 5 or 6 proton beam therapy places in the entire country.
Wow.
So we were just so lucky that it was as close as it was, that we were able to utilize it. So that was basically what happened in April in March and April, and then May we came home. He was done with the proton therapy, and we're thinking maybe we could move forward. And he was having some complications from the radiation. He was having trouble swallowing, which they said would happen, And he had to go back into the hospital because he was having trouble eating. And they wanted to do a scan to see if there was any damage. They did a scan, and there were multiple new tumors had grown. So it hadn't helped. That there had been cells left from the surgery, and they grew back, and the chemo again didn't do a thing.
So, we have to take a quick break. Yes. It's a very hard story. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Okay, everyone, we're going to be back in about 2 minutes. It's Denise with The Drive, my friend Jessica Gerber. We're going to talk more about how we can help families dealing with childhood cancers and what you can do to support your local community. Thanks so much.
Darien Sport Shop is a unique store because it's a family store. A busy mom can come in with kids in tow and find everything she needs for them, and even find a dress for herself for Saturday night. And if she's in a rush, she can simply go home and order it from us that night. We'll deliver it the next day. The Darien Sport Shop. We're pretty on the outside and amazing on the inside. Conveniently located with free and easy parking at 1127 Post Road, Darien, Connecticut. Or shop us online at dariensport.com.
When you experience a sports injury, you want to get better and fast. Coastal Ortho Express gives you direct access to orthopedic care quickly. Their physicians are fellowship trained in sports medicine at world-class universities and are also team doctors for area football teams. For specialized personal care of sports injuries, go to Coastal Ortho Express. Open Monday through Saturday in the iPark building, 761 Main Avenue in Norwalk, or coastalorthoexpress.com. Coastal Orthopedics, keeping you on the move.
Well, there's still a bite out on the water. Most anglers have decided to stow the gear for the winter. Just because Mother Nature isn't cooperating doesn't mean you can't see the latest models of all your favorite gear. With 2 convenient locations, it couldn't be easier to get your fix of summer. Boater, beach bum, fisherman, or simply love the New England coast, this is a unique place to shop. The Dock Shop, 51 Tokenique Road, Darien, 609 Riverside Avenue, Westport, or on the web, dockshop.com.
It's the new year. The to-do list is long and it's easy to feel pulled in many directions at once. Your professional, personal shoppers at Walter Stewart's are ready to check groceries off your list by shopping for you. Save extra time this year and spend it doing more important things. Great food and wine delivered to your home with the same-day service. Shop Stewart's online at stewartsmarket.com.
I'm Kate Chaplinsky. Join us for Coffee Break, weekdays at 11 to get the latest Connecticut news, weather, high school sports, and more. News doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break on the HAN Network.
Welcome back. It's Denise, live every Tuesday here on HAN Network, HAN Network, with The Drive. The Drive is about things that motivate us and move us forward. And even though on certain days like today we talk about tough subjects, we need to be aware of them so we can all help each other and move each other forward. You know, my grandmother used to say, awareness is the first key to success. So thanks so much for being here, Jessica. So after Teddy relapsed, he passed in August.
Yeah, I mean, basically he was in the hospital the entire summer, and we just were never able to kind of find a balance to be able to get him home. And he did come home very briefly for about a week and then had to go back in, and then he passed away in August. So
what is the best way that you can share, having been on that side of the experience, for people that want to help and that want to be truly part of the journey, not necessarily just nosy about the journey? What can you give? Because I myself, you know, could only sign up to cook the meals, not knowing what to say. So what can you give advice, and what can you give advice to the mom and dad that are actually suffering in the journey? Like, what's the best thing looking back?
Well, I would say one thing that was really helpful was for people to not to reach out to us. I mean, and not necessarily, I mean, this is the beauty of our technology age now, is that you can text and email people and share things with them without having to actually bother them with a conversation. And I will say, throughout the whole course of Teddy's illness, and since then, you know, there have been people who will just once in a while send an email to me just saying, just want you to know I'm thinking of you. And you can't imagine how powerful that is, to have that, just to know that someone's thinking of you or thinking of your child. Or
what's the
thinking
one
of your
thing
family.
people shouldn't do?
Try to force themselves on you.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard because, you know, obviously people want to help, And I would say to show up unannounced with a meal probably isn't a great thing, even though it's helpful, which is why we were so happy that we had the people set up the meal schedule, because that was huge to be able to do that and to expect at a certain time someone was coming in. We knew if something changed, I could contact that person and say, I'm sorry, we don't need dinner tonight. So it took the pressure off us. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that you want to help people, but you don't want to put more pressure on them.
Right.
Which is why when someone says, let me know what I can do, or anything I can do, the last thing a parent who's dealing with a child with cancer needs to do is rack their brains thinking of some task to give somebody else to do.
What about your kids? What did you do to help them through this?
Well, again, I think just trying to keep their lives as normal as possible, to make sure that we were always on time to pick them up, or that someone was always on time to pick them up from school, that they were able to have play dates. I mean, sometimes we weren't able to do that because when Teddy was home, we were worried about his immune system from the chemo, so we had to be careful with germs, especially in the winter. So sometimes we would say, well, you can't have somebody over, but we'll take you bowling, or we'll go see a movie or something like that. We wanted them to feel that just because we were spending an inordinate amount of time with Teddy, which we had to do, we weren't not going to be with them.
So they were
for
equally
them.
as loved.
Of course.
Of
and
course.
we made it very clear to them that we understood that they were unhappy or upset if we weren't around, and that we wanted to do things with them when we had an opportunity to, but they also had to understand, and we were lucky in that they were a little bit older. If they'd been toddlers or something like that, I mean, obviously lots of parents have to deal with that, and I think that's really, really hard.
So tell us a little bit about the St. Baldrick's Foundation and how you're connected. I know you have an event and a Team Teddy.
Yes.
We want to know more about that.
Yes. Well, St. Baldrick's is a foundation that funds pediatric cancer research. And we had first heard about it because the Cub Scout troop at Osborne Hill, which my sons actually weren't members of, but they had an event for a number of years before Teddy got sick. And after he got sick, we had some friends who were involved in Cub Scouts reach out to us and say, we're doing our event again this year. We'd like to do it in Teddy's honor. Would he like to come? And we said, well, if he's around, we'd love to. I mean, it would sound great. We didn't really know much about it. We'd heard about it. And of course, you'd see all the bald kids running around in school afterwards, because the whole point of the fundraiser is that people sign up, they get people to sponsor them, and then the night of the event, they get their heads shaved. So they're kind of showing solidarity with children who are bald, who don't have the choice of being bald or not. And they're also raising money that goes directly to pediatric cancer research.
So how are children cancers different than adult cancers?
They just impact, children's bodies are different. You're talking about bodies that are developing.
Right.
And just think, when you have a child who is sick, do you give them adult Tylenol or children's Tylenol? And there are so few chemotherapies that are directly targeted to help children. So the chemotherapies that you're giving children, including the ones that Teddy had, were ones, first of all, that are quite old, and second of all, are not designed to be given to a small, young, developing body. And the way they impact them is so much different than it would to an adult.
I liked what St. Baldrick's website said about, we're celebrating children, we're not pitying them.
Exactly.
And trying to create awareness and also drive revenue to that research that will differentiate an adult drug versus a pediatric drug.
Right. And just to try to develop, there's only been one pediatric cancer drug that's been developed in the last 30 years.
Wow.
That's problematic.
That's very problematic.
It is. And and it's hard because there are so many different types of pediatric cancers. So, you have organizations that focus, specifically on, say, like breast cancer or something like that, and do great work with that. But pediatric cancers, there are so many different ones. It's a lot harder to kind of focus on that, which is why St. Baldrick's is so great, because that's exactly what they do. But again, like you said, celebrating children is also very important. One of the things that was hardest for Teddy throughout the course of his illness was the fact that he wasn't really able to be a kid. He wasn't able to have fun. He was missing school. He was missing play dates and things like that with his friends. And all he wanted to do was be a normal 9-year-old. And the night of the St. Baldrick's event, which lucky he was able to attend, he was thrilled. And he took his sweatshirt off. He always wore a hooded sweatshirt, and he took it off and he said, I'm not the only bald person here anymore. And that was just so huge. In addition to the fact that we were raising awareness for pediatric cancer and raising money, the fact that he had a great night was just so huge to us.
Yeah.
And so important.
So important.
You know, and just that he was the focus of attention in a good way.
In a positive
You know,
way.
not like, oh, there's the little bald boy, or oh, Teddy's back in school for the first time in 3 weeks, and you know, how do we treat him? He was the head of the party, and that was great.
In the spirit of the daily drive, because you seem very driven and very positive to me, and I, of course, am sitting here going, what if this was me? How did you stay, and I'm sure other people are as well, how did you stay so positive? Okay, all mothers are the rock, we know. We just have to mow through it. But what were you doing for yourself to keep this moving forward in a way that you weren't, maybe you were crumbling internally, but what were you doing?
Well, you know, because there were so many different stages to Teddy's illness, and there were so many different goals we had, you know, first to find out what it was, then to find, you know, the chemo, then to get the surgeon, then to get the radiation, that we had these specific goals that we had to focus on. But then there was just the overall goal of trying to keep our lives as normal as possible.
So you're very goal-oriented, and
yeah,
you're focused.
which is helpful, because you have so much control taken away from you when your child becomes sick and has cancer. There are so many things that you can't do. So if you can find a specific goal that you can focus on, something tangible that you can hold on to that helps you move forward, I think that's huge.
Is that what you'd want to leave? Because of course the point of the show is to leave our listeners unstuck, aware, and hopefully moving them forward. So if you were going to share this with one mom who's dealing with this now, or post, who maybe isn't having a great experience post, what would you share?
I would share that, you know, you have to try to stay as positive as possible. You have to try to look at every single avenue you can find to try to help your child and to help your children who are healthy keep their lives as normal as possible. And you just have to keep trying, and you have to keep hoping that something positive will come out of this. You have to be glass half full about it, to the best of your abilities. And you're going to have days that are going to be wretched and awful, and that's fine. There are going to be times when you're not going to want to talk about it, and that's fine too. But you also, it's so important to have a goal to focus on to try to help yourself and help your child.
Okay, so the name of the foundation is St. Baldrick's
Baldrick's
Foundation,
Foundation, yes.
and your event, everyone, it's on Facebook, by the way. We're showing it now. Team Teddy, March 18th.
Yes.
I encourage you, and of course you're going to be able to find more of this on the HAN networks and the websites throughout the, is it the day or the week, guys? It'll be up for the week. Please join us in celebrating not only Teddy's life, but all the other children that have cancer, and spend some time finding your awareness and helping out.
Yeah.
I thank you so very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
And I hope maybe you'll touch base with us and let us know how your event went, and maybe come back again next year.
Sure, definitely
It's a pleasure
will.
having you. Thanks so much,
Thank
Jessica.
you.
All right, guys, we'll be right back for some mindful minutes, and then we're going to wrap up, and we'll tell you about what's coming on next week. Thanks so much. It's Denise, live here on The Drive every Tuesday.
Denali is your outdoor retail destination in the Westfield Trumbull Mall. For the last 21 years, we have carefully selected clothing, footwear, and gear from a variety of the best outdoor brands, such as the North Face, Patagonia, Vineyard Vines, UGG, Merrell, GoPro, New Balance, and many more. Our stores have a friendly, knowledgeable staff to help you with all of your running, hiking, and cold weather needs, and in discovering all things outdoorsy and awesome. Visit us in the Westfield Trumbull Mall or online at denalioutdoor.com.
Find over 1,000 special stories at Hospital for Special Surgery. Go to hss.edu/backinthegame.
I was jogging 5 months after my cartilage tear.
Skiing a year after hip surgery.
And playing grandma 4 weeks after hip replacement.
One special hospital, 1,000 special stories. See Connecticut patients at hss.edu/CT.
Tired of all the bull? Relax and enjoy the experience of buying a car at Pamby Chrysler Jeep Dodge and Ram. No bull allowed.
For more than 50 years, Triple S has been Fairfield County's expert service for carpet, upholstery, and drapery cleaning. With We provide the best in repairs and in-depth restoration, understanding fabrics and how to properly clean and restore them. Our staff will come to your home to clean your wall-to-wall carpet to perfection. We can also pick up your fine carpets and bring them to our facilities with locations in Norwalk, Stamford, and Stratford. Triple S will get the job done fast, big or small. At Triple S, you can count on our people as well as our cleaning.
Find us at triplesclean.com or 203-847-8000.
The HAN Network is the leader in local broadcasting in Fairfield and Westchester counties. We reach tens of thousands of viewers via our live news, sports, and entertainment broadcasting. We can create your advertisement and broadcast it through our programming to one of the most affluent markets in the United States. And remember, our broadcasting is live, which means viewers cannot skip or click past your marketing message. And we measure our audience and their demographics on every broadcast. To advertise on the HAN Network, contact Advertising Director Jessica Murrin at 203-273-7312 or email jessica@han.network.
We're back. Okay, it's been another great day here on The Drive, learning about the inside journey of families dealing with cancer. My mindful tip for today, my go-to word this month is sooner. If you remember last month when we came on with Carol and we were talking about resolutions and recommitting to ourselves, not necessarily resolutions, but creative intentions. Sooner or later, you'll have to try it, find it, love it, or lose it. How about starting today? So find yourself a go-to word, one that motivates you. The Drive isn't about faster. It's about making a little bit of progress each and every day. And of course, naturally, I'm going to tell you to pick up your copy of My Daily Drive, an agenda for your mind, body, spirit, and soul. You can find it on Amazon or my website, DeniseDiGrigoli.com. A little creativity creates a little bit of awareness, moves those goals forward. It's a little bit of focus, a little bit of planning. Next week, we're going to have Dr. Weiss on talking about seasonal allergies and what we can do to make ourselves a little healthier. If you're interested in being on The Drive, you can tweet us at Han Network or me, Han Network CT. Let me get it straight. Thanks, Eric. Or Denise DiGrigoli, and we'd love to have you on The Drive. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week. Thanks.